My speech is about caring for a Greek goddess. Never did I think the Greek goddess would have such a profound and lasting effect on me. And did you know that Van Gogh fell peacefully in love with her? Not to mention she is highly revered by kings as a symbol of royalty and power, and her gifts are priceless. She is a keeper of memories, love, and renewal. And to this day, just like Van Gogh, I am forever changed in her garden. Are you wondering who this beauty is? I am referring to the iris. She is a flower gardener's dream. I know this because I've been growing irises for over 20 years now, tending, watering, nurturing, pruning, dividing, and sharing her gifts with others. So, I would like to tell you more about this amazing flower. First, some pointers on how to care for an iris. Secondly, I will mention a few myths and fascinating historical facts. And lastly, I will talk about my mentor and my mother-in-law, the green thumb gardener, who gave me my first iris. In conclusion, I'll share with you a few of life lessons that the iris has taught me. The iris is a perennial flower, and perennial means that it comes back year after year. There are over 300 species of irises, and they come in a wide variety of shapes, colors, and sizes. Buying a perennial flower is definitely worth the money. You could call it a nice little investment. It multiplies and returns bigger and better year after year. So listen carefully as I share some of these things. For instance, A, helpful tips on how to care for an iris. B, something a little disturbing about Van Gogh and why the iris is referred to as a Greek goddess. And C, how I came to be so fond of this lovely flower. The iris is a strong, resilient flower. It's easy to grow and requires very little care. Basically, you can't hurt this flower. You can pull it up and just chuck it away and go back and look at where you chucked it a week later and it will just grow. But you wouldn't want to do that. It is a flower gardener's favorite because it loves the sunshine. It's very versatile and provides beautiful color in the garden. Ray Allen, founder of American Meadows, is one of the most respected online retailers of flower seeds. His expertise and experience in flower gardening has helped many gardeners all over across North America for over 30 years. Ray wrote an article called All About Irises, and in this article he gives some really great basic facts on how to care for an iris, such as how to plant an iris, like some specifics, how to divide an iris plant, and when is the best time of year to do that, mulching and how important that is, and lastly, how to fertilize, including precautions that you need to take so that you can get the best growing results. You too can have a beautiful, healthy iris. By following Ray's helpful advice along with my experience, you can have an iris of your very own. Irises prefer their roots, which we call rhizomes, to be only half buried. They don't like to be buried all the way. They grow in small clumps, few inches, and you should plant them like a few inches apart from each other. One common mistake that people make is they bury them too deep, and when you do that, you won't have a flower. They like to be almost above the ground. Remember, they like 6 hours of full sun. When you're dividing them up, the rhizomes that we talked about earlier, make sure you do that with a sharp knife. This is easy because they aren't deep in the ground, and you should do this after they bloom. Mulching is also important because that helps to keep the moisture in the soil around them and so that their roots get the water that they need, especially during hot, dry weather. Fertilizing in the spring is very important also. This helps the roots to grow and the plant to flourish. Some of the things that I've done in the past is I've collected eggshells and then I just crumble them all up and sprinkle them around the base of the iris, and it seems to work out just great. One healthy clump of iris rhizomes planted correctly will flourish and multiply just like that investment that I told you about earlier. For example, I have divided my irises several times. Still, they are beautiful and healthy. One precautionary note that you might want to remember is when you are giving or receiving any kind of plant, you should always check the roots for any kind of pests or snails. One snail can overpopulate a garden and just cause lots of havoc. The bearded iris is the iris for which I am speaking of. It is one of 4 main types of irises. Some of the characteristics of this iris are that it is very popular in size and it has a lot of colorful blooms. It's 27 to 41 inches tall with beautiful blooms measuring 4 to 7 inches across. It has long, slender, sword-like leaves and stays green all summer, which makes it a great plant to put in your garden in those empty spaces that you need. The roots, as we talked like before, are called rhizomes, and they just grow in clumps. Growing an iris really is pretty simple. Hopefully, I have inspired you somewhat that you might want to grow an iris yourself. Now, let's explore some Greek mythology having to do with the iris. Greek mythology tells of a Greek goddess whose name was Iris, and she provided a passageway between death and the afterworld. These myths are deeply rooted into the Greek culture. Julie Martin Fournier, writer and blogger for Perennial Resource, gives some fascinating insights into this Greek myth. First, the Greek goddess of the rainbow is named Iris. She travels on the rainbow between heaven and earth. There's a tradition that the Greek plant irises on the graves of their loved ones, and that is to call Iris, the Greek goddess, to take their loved ones from earth to heaven. Kind of weird, huh? Historically and symbolically, the iris was used for centuries as a visual elegance and prestige, power, and royalty. King Edward III added the iris to his coat of arms during the 14th century, and Queen Elizabeth I had a famous painting painted of her wearing a beautiful embroidered dress that had wild irises all over it. An iris can also tell fascinating stories through art. For instance, remember the Van Gogh story I was going to tell you? He painted a painting of irises, and it sold in an auction for over $35 million. Why? Perhaps because he painted it at a desperate, most vulnerable point in his life. Looking carefully at this painting, you can see his gentle portrayal of the blue irises. Maybe this is his way of finding peace. Van Gogh did a lot of self-mutilating, bet you didn't know that, and he had countless hospitalizations throughout his life. Eventually, he chose to enter an insane asylum. Van Gogh, in that time that he was there, painted over 130 paintings, working from nature of the gardens around that asylum. But his most famous painting, the one for which I had just told you about, called Irises, he painted within the first week that he was there. From what we have learned so far throughout centuries, the iris has played an important role in cultural and history. All this from a seemingly common and simple flower. You may never look at the iris the same again. Beware. Now, my favorite subject, the green-thumb gardener. My mother-in-law. The green-thumb gardener taught me how to garden through example and hard work and simple gratitude. I was the one that inherited her gratitude journal, and in that she had 1,545 gratefuls. Imagine. A lot of them were about gardening and nature around her, which I really appreciated. Let me share with you some of her quotes. Number 144, grateful for the tools I have to work in my garden. Sometimes I would visit her garden when she was alive, and she would take me around and she could name all of those plants by name. And she had such this appreciation of so much beauty. And she actually taught me how to appreciate those simple things also. Let me share another one. Number 219, grateful for Jerry's interest in the same things that interest me, which is gardening. Sharing her gifts of hard work and simple beauty taught me so much. In an interview with a friend of mine who is a master gardener, it reminded me of this wise advice about an iris. An iris is like a promise of life and death, a promise of the plan. It works in the pattern of the whole creation, like the Creator gave us something to remind us of renewal. I have the green thumb gardener's white iris, and it does remind me of her love and grateful heart. I hope I have been able to paint a beautiful visual picture of the beauty and simplicity of the iris, but more importantly, the lessons that I learned for caring for an iris. She arrives every year resilient and strong, hopeful through seasons of life, and I am a recipient of her beautiful and priceless gifts. She is blessing me still with what was and what is to come, adorning my table with the sweetest of memories, a promise of hope and renewal. I am forever changed in her garden. Thank you.